In this video, I'm going to talk about how to import a new animation sequence and use it for a dock, and also how to set up the gameplay code to use that dock in a runtime environment. So first, let's find an animation that is currently intact. I'm using this example where the character goes and sits on a chair, pulls the chair out, sits on the chair, and then pushes the chair back and walks away. And he does that by approaching the chair from different angles and leaving it at different angles. Now the result of our work today is not going to look perfect because we're not going to simulate the moving chair, but we'll rather just have a statically placed chair. But that should serve the purpose of this tutorial, where we want to demonstrate how to import this animation into the MotionFlow system. So let's first begin by annotating this animation. So I'm going to just zoom in over here a bit, where the character starts entering the task over here. There's the turn and then the sit. So around here we want the task to be finished, and we want to start the task somewhere around here. So what I'm going to do is add a notify state for task, and then the first thing I'm going to do is sort of place this task around the region where our task is, and task notify around the region where our dock is being performed. So the character, I kind of want to include this footstep in our task as well, so I'm going to drag this back a bit more. And then over here the character enters the task and sits around here. So that's good. So next what I'm going to do is add another notify state here, which is called task search. So what this does is it tells the MotionFlow system where to perform an entry into this particular task. So what we would like to do here is at least include one full locomotion cycle here in this task search. So let's say here the character is going to take off his right foot. So let's capture another a full locomotion cycle at least, where the character is about to pick up his right foot. And I'm going to just leave it. It doesn't need to be perfect. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, so before that, notice that I've added another track here for notify, and you can add these notify states into as many tracks as you like to keep your work manageable. But right now we're going to be using maybe these first two tracks. So the other thing we need to tell the system is to when to stop warping, because the system warps based on where you're coming from and where you need to go. So when the character places the footstep over here, we know that the character has kind of stopped moving and is about to pull the chair. So we would like to stop the warp around this point. So what I'm going to do is right click over here and add another notify, which is called contact. Next, we'd like to also tell the system where the task has finished and where it is ready to transition into some other task. And around here would be a good time where the character has come to a neutral seated position. I'm going to add another notify, and we'll call this BP anim notify task. So here, the other thing that we need to do is to specify where the task meshes. So we're going to pick a chair from the right details panel over here under task mesh and select the chair static mesh, and then we are going to move the static mesh and place it so that it's around where the character is currently seated roughly. And this is what's going to be used in the system later to specify to use as a docking location. This basically annotates in the animation where the character is sitting. So I'm going to save my work, and then what we want to do is create a copy of this. So this basically denotes a full annotation for the sitting task. And we're going to create a copy of this and do a similar thing over here for the getting up from the chair task. So let's see, paste absolute. There we go. I'm going to pull it a bit closer, actually maybe a bit more, so that it slightly overlaps. It doesn't need to actually, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And again, here the task search is not doesn't need to be perfect, so I'm just going to leave it like this. There's no footstepping matching to be performed because the character is sitting. So some reasonable task search over here is fine. We don't need a warp for an exit, so I'm going to remove the contact. And then at this point, we're going to say that the character has exited. Maybe let's say at this point, we'll say that the character has finished exiting the get up from chair. So we're going to drag this BP underscore task. And now since we copied it, it is already annotated with the chair and already has this transform set from the chair. So let's save our animation here. And this is the annotation we're going to do. And you can repeat this for the remaining entries and exits from the chair if you have that in your data. So one thing that we haven't done yet is to tell the system what task it is. So if you select this task notify, you'll see that the constraint class needs to be tagged here. And we have some constraints for different tasks like switch, cover, vault. So we're going to go and create a constraint now. So before we are able to annotate the sitting on chair and get up on chair task. So the constraints are used to generate feature vectors. They specify what kind of constraint fragments to use, which specify what kind of feature vector fragments are generated. So what we are going to do is we're going to use some of our existing constraint fragments and reuse them to create our sitting example. So I'm going to duplicate these two, which is the constraint switch and constraint switch exit. And I'm going to call it constraint sit desk. And I'm going to call this other one constraint sit desk exit. So now constraint sit desk basically needs a new task name. We'll call it sit desk. And we don't need to change any of the fragments here because it's going to act very similar to how switch constraint acts. Or a light switch constraint. Basically, it has a pose fragment and has a distance fragment that measures the distance from, in this case, the chair you're sitting on. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to copy this name because I'm going to reuse it for our sit desk exit. And I'm going to add an exit at the end. I'm going to save this as well. So now we can go back to our animation and select our first task segment where the character is sitting on the chair, and we will name that or annotate that with constraint sit desk. And similarly for the next task segment where the character is getting up from the chair, I'm going to annotate that with constraint sit desk exit. So now we are done with the annotation of this animation entirely, with the exception of the other approaches, which is a very similar process to this. I'm not going to do that in this video. So I'm going to close that animation sequence. So the next thing we need to do is add that animation into our motion data asset. So if you navigate to the data assets folder and we open the combat jog motion data asset, which is what we're going to use for the purposes of this tutorial. So you can use your own motion data asset that houses your own animations and skeleton information. But here I'm just going to add another element to the motion data array. And over here I'm going to find that animation, which is desk enter exit. And I'm going to save this asset. But before we do that, one thing we need to do in the animation, let's go back to our animations folder and make sure that the enable root motion is turned on, because we are going to be using the root motion from the character. So whenever you're doing the annotation, you'll have to disable this enable root motion so that you can actually see the character moving here for you to annotate your task correctly. But once you're done, re-enable this and then save this animation. So now I'm going to save this motion data asset. So what that's going to do is it's going to go through all this animation, look at all the different annotations that's been done, and generate feature vectors for each of these tasks. So now since we have annotated this task with a constraint set desc with two fragments, which is the pose and the distance. It is going to use those fragments to generate feature vectors for the duration of this task search window, which is what is going to be matched in the motion matching algorithm. And similarly here for the set desc exit, it is going to build feature vectors for this task search window and save it inside the motion data asset. So you don't need to do that during runtime, but that gets saved into the data asset that can be loaded into the runtime. So now that this completes the annotation of the animation and adding that into the motion flow system, now you can have any gameplay code use that system. I'm going to show one way of doing that, but it entirely depends on your game, on how you have implemented the gameplay side of things to know what to do in order to use this new task. So in our implementation, we use the ability system. So and the ability system basically are implemented through these base abilities, which we're going to be looking at the dock entry base ability and the dock exit base ability, or rather the abilities that derive from these two. So because first we want to do a dock entry, that is the entry to the chair, and then we want to do the dock exit, that is exit from the chair. So again, we're going to pick up these two examples for the switch, and we're going to duplicate those. And I'm going to call this again GA_SitDesk, and we'll call this GA_SitDesk exit. Now I'm going to open the first one, and over here you'll see that the first thing it needs is an animation request. So let's go and create the animation request for our new task. So again, here let's find the two animation requests for switch. I'm going to duplicate that again. I'm going to call this animation request SitDesk and animation request SitDesk exit. I'm going to open this animation request, and here you will see that it takes in a motion data asset and a constraint class, which is constraint switch. So this needs to be changed to constraint set desk, because that's the constraint we need to use it. The animation request is used to perform a search. So you provide what constraint to search with and what motion data asset to search in. So that basically comprises of the animation request. And similarly for the exit, we again are going to use the same motion data asset, but instead of constraint switch exit, we're going to do constraint sit desk exit. So I'm going to save that. So now if I close these two and go back to the sit desk gameplay ability, so now from here, from the drop down, I can pick animation AR_SitDesk as our animation request class. We are still going to be doing a dock, and over here then we is going to be using a task actor, and this is the actors over here, for example, on which we can perform the task. So for example, if I play my character and I do a vault, then it's performing the task on that obstacle over here, and this is a blueprint that we have created. And again, you can use any mechanism to do that. But here, let's continue with this what we have as an example. So I'm going to open navigate to this BP_switch. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to call it BP_chair because that's what we want to sit on. So I'm going to open this, and let's go to viewport. I'm going to find the static mesh. I'm going to reset its transforms, resets its location, and let's say over here in the static mesh, we're going to find the chair, and this panel mesh I'm going to delete. So let's make sure that the chair is actually on the ground. So I'm going to move it up. So it is roughly on the ground. I'm going to reduce my snapping a bit so that I can place it a bit more. Let's look at it from the side. There we go. So I'm going to now save this blueprint. And if you click on the root or the BP underscore chair over here, then we'll notice that it also has a gameplay tag, which basically tells the ability system of which tag, which kind of task that it can perform on. So here, these are, if you click on edit, these are the different tags that are there in the system. So we're going to add a new gameplay tag for our new task, and I'm going to call it sit desk. And I'm going to click save, and that basically assigns that gameplay tag that is used by the ability to perform the action. So I'm going to close this, and now here, going back to the gameplay ability for sit desk, the task actor, now we have our BP underscore chair, which we just created. And then the next ability is the ability that we want to launch once the sit desk ability is finished. So in this case, it is going to be sit desk exit. But since we don't have a sit desk exit gameplay tag yet, so I'm going to go here and add a new gameplay tag, which is sit desk exit. And again, in the ability task, currently it says switch here, so I'm going to change that to sit desk and remove switch. And each ability is set up to cancel a bunch of other abilities. So since we have added switch sit desk ability as well, we would want a sit desk ability to cancel a sit desk exit ability as well, and a switch ability in this case as well. So basically it should be canceling every other ability other than the dock, which is the common ability, or and itself. And then the final thing we have to do here is under the triggers, ability triggers. So currently it's, the trigger tag is set to switch. That needs to be changed to sit desk. And that's it. So we're going to save this gameplay ability. Now we'll do a similar setup for our gameplay ability for sit desk exit here. So first we're going to pick the animation request for sit desk exit. We're going to pick up our chair for the task actor class, and then the next ability task is combat jog, which we'll leave as is because that's what we want. Once we have finished doing the exit, we want to do combat jog, and then the ability tags here need to change from switch exit to sit desk exit. And then finally here, the trigger tag under triggers need to also change from switch exit to sit desk exit. So I'm going to save this. So the other thing that we need to do is in the data asset abilities, that is under the abilities folder. This is where we store all the abilities that the character is able to perform. So now our character is able to perform 2 more abilities. So I have added 2 more abilities here now. And then I'm going to go and select our gameplay ability, sit desk, gameplay ability, sit desk exit. I'm going to click save. So this basically sets up all the ability related information for the character. So now one final thing we need to do is to create a system where this ability gets activated by our player character. So first, to do that, we'll go to your project settings, and under input here you see that we have various action mappings for various abilities that get launched. So I'm going to create a new action mapping for sit desk, and let's say we use the key T on the keyboard. You'll use the key press input action here. So I'm going to close this and go to our character blueprint now, which is under characters, mannequin, blueprint. And here is the player character blueprint. And here you'll see that very different abilities basically just connect the input action which we just created in the input settings, and then they activate an ability with a tag. So we're going to do the same for sit. So let's do sit here, and this is the new action that we just created. And then we are going to do activate ability, and from task we are going to do sit desk. And we're going to get a reference to self, because that's the actor that we want to provide to the activateAbility function. I just comment this as set. So there's this older set action which I'm going to delete. Okay, that all looks good. We are not using jump or reset VR, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. So I'm going to click save and close this. So now the one final thing that we need to do is actually place the chair that the character can sit on in the world. So if you go to our blueprints tasks folder, which is where we created our chair, so I'm just going to drag it here into the world, and this is what we're going to perform the task on. So if I hit play now, so we can still do our old abilities, like if I press B, then it will perform the vault. And now we'll try to do the chair by pressing T. That seems to do nothing. So let's see what's going on. So first, let's validate that our character is actually triggering the ability. So we'll open the character blueprint. And we're going to ensure that this ability actually gets activated. So I'm going to hit play, and then here I'm going to change this drop down to MF player character, so that now if I hit T, we should see if that action input action is being activated, but our activateAbility does not seem to be doing what we want. So let's ensure that our chair is indeed set with the correct task, with the correct tag, which is sit desk. And then the next thing which we should do is we should validate that we haven't messed up our ability system. So we have added the sit desk and the sit desk exit over here, and under the gameplay abilities for the sit desk, we have set the sit desk tag here and the sit desk task here, and then we ask it to perform a sit desk exit next. So one way to validate this is that this ability is actually being executed is we're going to open our base dock entry, and let's put a breakpoint here on the activateAbility event, so that will tell us if that ability was launched or not when I hit the T key. So if I hit T, that ability is indeed being launched, and let's see what the animation, what the anim request is. I'm going to add a breakpoint here. We'll resume. So our tag is set to dock, which is correct. The anim request spec, or anim request class. Let's look at that. That looks like it is animation request sit desk, so that also sounds correct. But for some reason, our task notify is not being executed, and that's because now I realize that is because we have not added our animation node in the animation graph. So there are two ways to do that. So let me show you what's missing first. So in the animation blueprint right now, we don't have a node for our sitting example. So we can do that, or we can also use the mixed animation graph, which basically has two states, locomotion and dock. And in this case, everything that's a dock is a dock, so you don't need to add another docking state. This dock state basically handles all kinds of docks. So let's try to use this for the purposes of this example. So I'm going to go to my player character and select the character mesh, and in the anim class here we want to pick the mixed NMBP over here. I'm going to hit save, and now most likely our system should work. So let's go again, move around, let's put it on that, it's T, that triggers the breakpoint. I'm going to disable that. I'm going to disable this breakpoint too, and then I'm going to resume. And you can see that the character now pulls the chair. Again, the chair is not simulated, the chair is static. And once the character gets up, it should launch the next ability for exiting, and this should launch the ability to locomotion. So I'm going to do that again. Press T. Now this is using a normal walking locomotion, so it looks not the best when it transitions from a combat jog locomotion style, and from here when it transitions back to a combat jog, the transition is sudden. But if we were using a locomotion data, it would look better. So, but for the purposes of this video, this basically demonstrates how you can import new data into your system and set up your gameplay code to use that data. Hope this helps. Thank you.